The mug shattered first. Then everything went still. 7-year-old Lily Mercer stood in the kitchen doorway of their small apartment above a closed pawn shop in Harbor Point, Massachusetts, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Her mother was on the floor beside the table, one hand in a puddle of spilled tea, her dark hair half across her face. Steam still lifted from the broken cup. A thin line of blood ran behind her ear and disappeared into the pale tile. Lily took one shaky step forward, clutching her stuffed rabbit so tight, its worn ear bent in her fist. Her voice came out small. "Mom?" No answer. For 1 second, fear locked her in place. Then she remembered what her mother always told her. If something goes wrong, call Mr. Noah downstairs. Lily dropped the rabbit, climbed onto the counter, and grabbed her mother's phone with both hands. Her fingers were cold and clumsy. She opened the contacts list and pressed the number she thought was right. The call rang once. A man answered. His voice was low, calm, and tired. "Hello?" Lily swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. Is this Mr. Noah?" There was a pause. "No." Her breath caught. She almost hung up. Then she looked back at the kitchen floor and heard herself whisper, "Please don't go. My mom fell down. She's bleeding, and she won't wake up." The voice on the phone changed at once. No more sleep in it. No more distance. "Sweetheart, listen to me. What's your name?" "Lily." "Okay, Lily. I need you to stay on the line. Can you tell me where you are?" She turned in a circle like the answer might be written on the wall. "I don't know the street. We live above Cole's pawn shop. There's a green door. Apartment 2C. The man did not ask why she had called him. He did not say she had the wrong number. He only said, "Stay by the door. I'm coming." Miles Carter stood barefoot in the dark of his penthouse, phone still in his hand, city lights shining through the glass behind him like cold stars. For half a second he stayed perfectly still. Then he moved. He grabbed the first coat he saw, snatched his keys from the counter, and was out the door in less than 10 seconds. 12 minutes later, his black SUV slid hard against the curb of a narrow side street lined with old brick buildings and patches of dirty snow. The neighborhood was quiet in the late winter dark. A flickering sign from the pawn shop below painted the sidewalk in weak yellow light. Above it sat a chipped green door with peeling paint and rust around the knob. Miles took the steps 2 at a time. The hallway smelled like old heat, dust, and boiled pipes. Apartment 2C stood cracked open. He knocked once, then pushed it gently wider. A tiny girl stood there in damp socks and an oversized sweater, holding a phone against her chest like it might protect her. Her eyes lifted to his face. "You came," she said. "I did." She stepped back. The apartment was small but clean in the careful way poor homes often are. A folded blanket sat on the couch. A pot still warmed on the stove. A coloring book and crayons lay spread across the table. Nothing in the place looked careless. Everything looked stretched thin. Miles crossed the room and dropped to one knee beside the woman on the floor. She was breathing, but barely. Her skin looked too pale. There was a knot rising along the side of her head. He checked her pulse, steady but weak. Her wrist felt light in his hand. Too light. Like someone who had been running on too little for too long. He looked up at Lily. "I'm going to take your mom to the hospital now." Lily nodded fast, though fear still trembled in her mouth. "Get your coat, okay?" She ran to a chair by the door, grabbed a small pink jacket, and came back already trying to shove her arms into it. Miles slipped one arm beneath the woman's shoulders and the other under her knees. She weighed almost nothing. As he lifted her, her head rolled weakly against his chest. He felt a hard twist in his gut he had not expected. He carried her out into the freezing night. Lily hurried beside him, struggling to keep up. The SUV roared to life. Heat blasted from the vents as Miles laid the woman carefully across the back seat and helped Lily climb in beside her. The little girl tucked her rabbit beneath her mother's arm as if that might keep her safe. Miles pulled away from the curb and drove. At the first red light, Lily spoke from the back seat. "You're not Mr. Noah." "No." "Are you a doctor?" "No." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, very softly, "You came anyway." Miles tightened his hands on the wheel. "Yes." Outside, the city moved past in streaks of red and white. Wet pavement flashed under the streetlights. The heater hummed. In the mirror, he saw Lily watching him, not with fear, but with the kind of trust that lands hard because it is given before you deserve it. "She's going to be okay," he said. Lily leaned closer to her mother. "Promise?" The word came out before he thought about it. "I promise." He hated promises. He trusted almost none. But the moment he said it, he knew he would do whatever it took not to break it. At the emergency entrance, he did not wait for a wheelchair. He carried the woman straight through the doors and into the bright wash of hospital lights. A nurse started to protest. One look at the blood behind the woman's ear changed her mind. Everything moved fast after that. Doctors took her through double doors. Nurses asked questions. Lily sat stiff in a hard plastic chair, feet not touching the floor, jacket zipped to her chin. Miles brought her a bottle of water from a machine down the hall. She held it with both hands, but did not drink. "Is she your whole family?" he asked. Lily nodded. He looked away for a moment, toward the white hallway, the polished floor, the tired nurse at the desk. "I see." "She works a lot," Lily said. "Sometimes she says she's just tired, but I know she's really more than tired." Miles turned back to her. "So, children should not know things like that," he thought. A nurse finally returned. "She's stable. Head injury, dehydration, and exhaustion. No internal bleeding. She should wake up soon." Lily looked up at Miles at once. "Will you come with me?" He should have said no, he knew that. He was a stranger. His part in this was done. But when she reached for his hand, he did not pull away. He followed her into the room. The woman in the bed stirred slowly. Her eyelids fluttered. A wince passed over her face as she tried to lift her head. Then her eyes opened. They were tired eyes, clear, even through pain. They moved first to Lily, then to him. She frowned faintly. "Who are you?" Miles stood near the wall, hands still, voice even. "Your daughter called me by mistake. She said you fell. I brought you here." For a moment, confusion crossed her face. Then memory hit. He saw it in the way her jaw tightened, in the shame that flashed there before she pushed it down. She looked at Lily again. "Baby, are you okay?" Lily nodded quickly. He came fast, like in a movie. A weak breath of laughter escaped her mother, though pain still pulled at her face. Then she looked back at Miles, and whatever she wanted to say seemed to catch in her throat. At last she whispered, "Thank you." He gave one small nod. The room went quiet except for the soft beep of the monitor and the hiss of the vent overhead. The woman studied him with the wary look of someone not used to help arriving without a cost. Then, just as the nurse stepped in with a clipboard, her gaze sharpened. Something in his face had stirred a memory, and before she could stop herself, she said, "Wait, I know your name." Miles said nothing. Her voice came softer now, but steadier. "You're Miles Carter." He met her eyes. "Yes." And the look that passed across her face was not simple surprise. It was the kind that comes when a stranger walks into your worst night carrying more history than either of you is ready to name. Tessa Mercer had seen Miles Carter's face before. Not in person, not up close like this, standing in the corner of a hospital room with his coat still on and city rain drying on the shoulders. But she knew the name. Everyone in Boston knew it. His company funded emergency systems across half the Northeast. His face had appeared in magazines, on panels, in interviews she only half-watched while folding laundry after midnight. He was the kind of man people called brilliant, with a careful tone, as if brilliance had sharp edges. And he was standing in her hospital room because her daughter had called the wrong number. Tessa looked down at the blanket over her lap, then at Lily, who had climbed into the chair beside the bed and tucked her rabbit under her chin. "You stayed with her?" Miles answered before Lily could. "Yes." "You didn't have to." "I know." There was no pride in the words, no effort to sound noble. He said them like facts. The nurse stepped closer with discharge papers in one hand. "Miss Mercer, your vitals are better. We'll observe you another hour, but you should be able to go home after that if someone is with you tonight." Tessa gave a tired nod. "I understand." The nurse looked toward Miles. "Your husband already signed the responsible party forms." Tessa's head snapped up. "My what?" The nurse blinked, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I assumed—" "He's not my husband," Tessa said quickly. Miles did not react. "I signed because they needed someone to sign, that's all." The nurse mumbled an apology and stepped out. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving a silence that felt bigger than the room. Tessa pressed 2 fingers to her temple. "You paid for this too, didn't you?" Miles did not lie. "Yes." Her eyes closed for a second. "Why?" "Because you needed care." "That's not an answer." He looked at her calmly. "It's the only one I have right now." Lily slid off the chair and climbed onto the side of the bed, careful of the IV line. "Mama, please don't be mad at him. He helped." At once, the hardness in Tessa's face softened. She brushed a hand over Lily's hair. "I'm not mad, honey." But she still looked at Miles with caution. Gratitude was there, yes. So was confusion. And behind both sat something deeper. Pride. The kind that survives long after comfort has gone. "You should go home," she said. He could have. Maybe he should have. Instead, he asked, "Is there someone else coming for you?" She hesitated just long enough to answer the question without words. "No," she said at last. Miles gave a single nod, as if he had expected that. "Then I'll make sure you get back safely." Before Tessa could argue, Lily smiled for the first time that night. "Can he ride with us?" Tessa almost laughed despite the pain in her head. "He's not a field trip, Lily." But the child was already looking between them, hopeful and sleepy, and far too trusting. Miles glanced away, almost as if the warmth in that small voice made him uncomfortable. By the time dawn began to lighten the hospital windows, the city looked washed out and cold. A thin frost clung to the cab window as Tessa and Lily rode home. Miles followed behind in his own car and waited until they reached the green door of the apartment building before stepping out. Tessa stood on the sidewalk with one hand on Lily's shoulder. Her face had gone pale again from the walk up the steps. "You really don't have to keep doing this," she said. Miles looked at the building, then at her. "I know." She held his gaze. "You say that a lot." "It's usually true." Something like the smallest smile touched her mouth, then disappeared. He waited until they got inside. Only then did he return to his car and drive away. Tessa thought that would be the end of it. It was not. An hour later, while she stood in the kitchen staring at the dark stain she had missed on the floor, someone knocked on the door. 3 steady knocks. She froze with the damp rag still in her hand. Lily looked up from the couch. "Maybe it's him." Tessa opened the door. Miles stood there in a dark sweater, no tie this time, holding a plain paper bag. His hair looked slightly windblown, as if he had not bothered to check a mirror. He lifted the bag a little. "Gauze, pain medicine, electrolyte packets, crackers." He paused. "I wasn't sure what the hospital sent you home with." Tessa stared at him, caught again between gratitude and disbelief. "You came back?" "Yes." Lily appeared at her side with bright eyes. "Hi, Mr. Miles." His face changed at once, not into a smile exactly, but into something softer. "Hi, Lily." Tessa stepped aside before she could rethink it. "Come in." He entered quietly, as if he understood that some homes must be entered with care. The apartment looked harsher in daylight. The thin curtains, the patched kitchen chair, the old radiator clicking in the corner, Lily's school papers taped beside unpaid bills on the fridge. Nothing in it invited pity. Still, it told the truth. Miles set the bag on the counter. Tessa crossed her arms lightly, not defensive so much as steadying herself. "You said at the hospital that my name sounded familiar." "It did." She waited. Miles looked toward the small window above the sink. "Did you used to work at St. Catherine Medical?" Her expression changed at once. It was small, but he saw it. A tightening around the eyes. The body remembering before the mouth spoke. "Yes." "As a nurse?" "Head nurse in pediatric oncology." The room seemed to grow quieter. Lily, sensing something in the air she did not understand, carried her crayons to the other side of the room and began drawing on the coffee table. Tessa lowered her voice. "Why are you asking?" Miles answered with the same directness he had used all night. "Because St. Catherine received money through a health initiative I funded 5 years ago, and because your face looked familiar before I placed where from." She did not move. He went on. "There was a report. A child died. Equipment failure. The complaint was buried before it reached public review." Now she was very still. After a moment she said, "Who told you that?" "No one recently. I saw fragments years ago. Not enough to act on. Your name was attached to an internal note that never made it past compliance." Tessa looked past him for a long second, her eyes no longer in the apartment, but somewhere far away under hospital lights. "His name was Owen Pike," she said softly. "He was 8. Miles did not interrupt. "He had leukemia," she continued. "The monitor on his room had already glitched twice that week. I reported it both times. They said they'd replace it. They never did." Her fingers tightened around the back of the chair beside her. "The alarm failed during the night. By the time his mother ran into the hall screaming, he was already crashing." From the couch, Lily looked up. "Mama?" Tessa took a breath and steadied her voice. It's okay, honey. But it was not okay. Miles could hear that in every careful word she chose. They said it was a rare complication, Tessa said. They changed the language in the records. They called it unavoidable. Her jaw tightened. It wasn't. Miles felt something old and cold move through him. Not shock, recognition. He had sat in too many rooms where expensive people used clean words to cover ugly things. Did you keep anything? He asked. Tessa looked at him sharply. Why? Because if what happened to that child was covered up, it did not end with him. A long silence passed. Then she turned, crossed to the narrow drawer beside the stove, and pulled out a large brown envelope with creases at the corners. She held it in both hands for a moment, before giving it to him. I kept copies, she said. Incident logs, emails, shift notes, a supply form with a signature that never made sense to me. Miles opened the envelope carefully. The papers inside were neat, labeled, preserved by someone who had almost thrown them away 100 times and never could. He scanned the top page, then the second, then the third. When he reached the supply form, his expression changed. Tessa saw it at once. What is it? Miles lifted his eyes to hers. I know this name. She felt a small chill move through her despite the warmth of the radiator. Who? He held the paper a little tighter. Someone who has been too close to too many broken systems, he said. And when he looked back down at the file, the room seemed to tilt towards something neither of them could stop anymore. Tessa watched Miles read the pages one by one. The apartment was so quiet, she could hear the old radiator ticking in the corner and Lily humming softly to herself at the coffee table. Outside, tires hissed over wet pavement. Inside, all the air seemed to gather around the file in Miles's hands. At last he looked up. The signature on this supply form belongs to Adrian Keene, he said. Tessa frowned. Who is that? Miles set the papers down with great care. He was the financial officer on 3 health projects my company backed years ago. Every one of them went over budget. Every one of them collapsed. At the time, I believed the reports I was given. His mouth tightened. Now I'm not so sure. Tessa leaned against the counter, one arm wrapped around herself. You think this goes beyond one hospital? I do. She gave a tired, humorless laugh. That figures. Miles looked at her. You sound like someone who stopped being surprised a long time ago. That happened after I learned how easy it is for the truth to disappear when poor families are the ones left grieving. The words landed between them and stayed there. Miles lowered his gaze for a moment. He knew something about guilt, about the way money could build a wall between a decision and the damage it caused. He had spent years funding systems, fixing headlines, moving fast, and trusting people with polished language and perfect resumes. Too many times he had believed a report because it was easier than looking at the human cost beneath it. He looked at the envelope again. May I take copies of these? Tessa did not answer right away. Lily slid off the couch and wandered over, clutching her rabbit. Mama, is something bad happening? Tessa bent and brushed her daughter's hair back from her face. Not right now, baby. Lily looked up at Miles. Are you helping? He met her gaze. Yes. She nodded once, simple as that, and went back to her crayons. Tessa straightened slowly. You can take them, she said. But only if you promise me one thing. What? No press. No using Owen's name to make some company statement sound noble. No smiling photos beside a hospital donation. If you do this, do it because it matters. Miles held her eyes. I promise. This time the words sounded different. He knew exactly what it cost. By noon, he was in his office overlooking the river, the envelope spread open across his desk. Gray light filled the room. His assistant had called twice. The board had sent 3 messages. He ignored all of them. Instead, he called the one person he still trusted when the truth needed a spine. Daniel, he said the moment the line connected, I need a full private audit on St. Catherine Medical, the Carter Health Initiative, and every contractor linked to Adrian Keene. On the other end, Daniel went silent for half a beat. How far back? 7 years? That's not a small job. I know. Daniel exhaled. You found something real. Miles looked at the papers on his desk, at Tessa's careful notes in dark blue ink, at the copy of the complaint letter she had never sent. Yes, he said quietly. I did. The next 48 hours moved like a storm. Daniel found shell vendors, shifted funds, replaced equipment that had never been replaced. Billing records signed off by people who claimed not to know each other. St. Catherine was only one piece. There had been other facilities, other corners cut, other complaints softened, delayed, or buried. And at the center of it sat Adrian Keene. By the 3rd day, Miles knew enough to act. He did not call reporters. He did not call public relations. He walked into a closed board meeting, set the file on the polished table, and said, "Read." The room stayed silent for nearly 20 minutes, except for the turning of pages. Finally, one of the directors looked up. If this is authenticated, Keene is finished. Miles's face did not change. It's authenticated. Another director shifted uneasily. This will damage the foundation. Miles looked at him with a calm so cold it made the room still. Good. Maybe then it will finally deserve to be rebuilt. By evening, Adrian Keene had been suspended pending criminal investigation. Emergency replacement orders were issued for flagged equipment across every linked facility. Internal review teams were brought in under outside legal watch. It was done quietly. But it was done. That night, Miles drove back to Harbor Point. Rain tapped lightly against the windshield. The pawnshop sign below Tessa's apartment buzzed the same weak yellow as before. He sat in the car for a moment, both hands resting on the wheel, and let himself feel something he had not allowed in years. Relief. Not pride. Not victory. Just relief that one truth had not been buried again. When he knocked, Lily opened the door before Tessa reached it. You came back, she said with a grin. I did. She stepped aside like she had been expecting him all along. Tessa stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, stirring something in a pot on the stove. The apartment smelled like garlic, broth, and warm bread. Her hair was tied back. She looked tired still, but no longer fragile. There was color in her face again. Miles took off his coat slowly. I hope this is a good time. Tessa studied him for a second. That depends. Did you come with bad news? No. Her shoulders eased. He stepped farther inside. Keene is suspended. The audit reached farther than we thought. The defective units are being pulled from every linked site. There will be investigations. Real ones. Tessa said nothing for a moment. Then she turned off the stove. Are the machines gone? She asked. Yes. All the strength seemed to leave her at once. Not in collapse, but in release. She gripped the edge of the counter and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were bright. "That's all I wanted," she whispered. "I didn't need revenge. I just wanted it to stop." Miles nodded. "I know." She looked at him then with something gentler than gratitude, something steadier. "You kept your promise." He almost smiled. "I had help." Lily raised her hand from the table as if in school. "I helped first." Tessa laughed softly. "Yes, you did." Miles looked at the little girl, then back at her mother. "Actually, she saved more than one person that night." Tessa's expression changed. "What do you mean?" He took a breath. This was harder than boardrooms, harder than reports, harder than numbers and blame. "I mean," he said slowly, "I think I had been sleepwalking through my own life for a long time. Work, damage control, money, more work. Then a frightened little girl called the wrong number, and suddenly there was something real in front of me I couldn't keep at a distance." Tessa held still. In the next room, rain brushed softly against the windows. Miles went on, quieter now. "I'm not here because I think I rescued you. I didn't. Lily did what mattered first. You were brave long before I showed up." He glanced down, then back at her. "I'm here because I don't want this to end at a hospital hallway and a file on a desk." Tessa's breath caught just a little. Lily looked between them, delighted by a tension she did not fully understand. "Can he stay for dinner now?" Tessa let out a small laugh, the kind that arrived before she could stop it. She looked at Miles, and for the first time there was no guardedness in her face, only caution, warmth, and the beginning of trust. "That depends," she said. "Can you stir the soup without ruining it?" Miles took one step toward the stove. "I can try." She handed him the spoon. Their fingers brushed for only a second, but it was enough. Lily climbed back into her chair, satisfied, and went on coloring. Miles stood beside Tessa at the stove while the soup simmered and the small kitchen filled with warmth. No grand speech came after that. No sweeping declaration. Just the quiet sound of spoons, rain, and a little girl turning pages at the table. But some beginnings do not need to be loud. Sometimes they start with a wrong number. Sometimes they begin with a promise made in fear and kept in full. And sometimes, in a worn apartment above a pawn shop, three lonely people discover that belonging can enter like a stranger, then stay like home. If you believe stories still matter, go ahead and hit subscribe, Stories Beyond the Porch. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Thanks for watching.